Welcome to the UIF Community Podcast. Before we get started, please keep in mind that this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed are those of the individual presenters and do not necessarily reflect UIF Corporation or its affiliates.
As-Salaam Alaikum. Today we're honored to have a truly inspiring guest, Mohammed Faris, the founder and CEO of the Productive Muslim Company. As an internationally recognized coach, speaker, and author of the best-selling book, The Productive Muslim, Where Faith Meets Productivity, Mohammed has revolutionized the way individuals and organizations integrate faith with peak performance. He's been recognized as one of the top 500 most influential Muslims in the world and has worked with Fortune 500 companies, government institutions, and nonprofits to help professionals, entrepreneurs, and students achieve holistic productivity. His work has been featured in many major news outlets, and he has delivered keynotes and training sessions across the globe. Welcome to the UIF Community Podcast, Mohammed. We're so excited to have you on with us. We were just talking a little bit before we started, and I was telling you we had a lot of our team members at UIF who were like, "You got to get Mohammed Faris on this podcast." So we're so happy that you're able to come on with us and share your insights. So I don't know if you want to just kind of share your background a little bit, where you started from and where you are now in terms of developing this company that very unique, kind of approach to things. So if you could kind of share your background with our guests, inshallah, those who don't know you.
Inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. As-Salaam Alaikum, and thank you so much for having me. Really honored to be here and really appreciate you setting this up and getting to know your community, inshallah ta'ala. So my name is Mohammed Faris. I'm from Tanzania, East Africa. I was born there, grew up in Saudi, UK, and then somehow ended in Dallas, so not too far. And now I'm living in UAE. And basically about almost 17 years ago, when I was in university, I found myself busy, right? I found myself overwhelmed. And I was just a student. I was a master's student. I had 2 jobs. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. And I felt busy. I'm like, man, imagine tomorrow I'll have kids and family. How would I handle this? So I kind of stumbled this whole science of productivity and getting things done. And I was like, wow, this whole thing about managing yourself and getting things done, like, that's pretty cool. I was never taught that as a skill. So I started researching, loved it. And then 2007, of course, was the golden years of blogging. So I was like, I want to also start a blog. SubhanAllah, I won't forget, it was November 2007. I was in the UK, and these 2 words, Productive Muslim, popped in my head. And I don't know where it came from, of course, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's just one of those things where you're just like, oh, that sounds like a cool name. Let me go and book this domain name. So I went ahead and booked the domain name, and I started blogging, talking about productivity. At that time, was purely just sharing what I was doing from productivity science and was out there in the self-help world. And then 2 months later, I shut the website down. I was like, stupid idea. Who's going to even watch this, read this stuff? What am I doing? I've got other more important things to do. I need to find a real job. And then, so I shut it down. But then, of course, I finished my master's degree and I was bored. I was like, that was like 6 months after I shut the website down. I realized I probably need to restart this again. And 2 things happened that kind of got me started. One was a 10-year-old boy emailed me and said, hey, I love their website. Like, what happened to your website? I was like, wow, fans. Someone actually reads my stuff.
That's awesome.
And then the second thing was actually, subhanAllah, I came across this hadith from Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that says, "Burika li ummati fi bukuriha," that there's barakah for my ummah in the early hours.
Right.
And I think that hadith hit me differently in the sense that here I was studying all these productivity gurus and experts, and they all talk about the same thing, like wake up early, get things done, the morning miracle, the 5 a.m. club. And I'm thinking to myself, they would never explain why, right? And subhanAllah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam talked about the idea of barakah. I was like, whoa, wait a second. What if instead of me trying to look what's out there and share about productivity to the world, what if I could look back into our own faith? Let me look back into the Quran, to the Seerah, into the Hadith, and almost like rediscover my faith, our faith from this productivity angle. And that's what got this whole journey started. This whole journey of just rediscovering, what does productivity mean even from a spiritual perspective? What does work-life balance mean? Redefining the whole genre of productivity from an Islamic worldview. And it's sort of led to the journey for the first book, The Productive Muslim, and the second book, The Baraka Effect. And it's been alhamdulillah such a journey that I'm blessed to be on, and ask Allah for that always to stay on this journey, not never leave, inshallah.
Inshallah. I mean, no, it's amazing. That is definitely one of those things. I think you had that epiphany and kind of just took a life of its own. So that's pretty awesome. So kind of getting into the questions, try to help people. Is one of the things we like to do with this podcast is to bring benefit to our listeners. We have a lot of young Muslim professionals, especially who listen in, who are clients, customers, and this is part of like what we want to do at our podcast here, is to bring out interesting guests like yourselves who can give them advice, help, who are on their own journeys in their professional life and personal life. But we have people who are, going into the questions, many people struggling with balancing work, family, and personal growth. So what's your top advice for managing it all effectively?
Love it. So the first thing to do is kind of redefine this whole work-life balance concept, because when you think about that term work-life balance, it almost says there's work and then there's life, right? As if work is not part of life, and as if work has its mind of its own. And I want us to rethink this holistically from two perspectives. Number one, from the perspective of recognizing, again, almost like first principles, what is the purpose of our life? The purpose of our life as Muslims to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? This idea of worship, idea of ubudiyya, of idea of being servants and slaves to God. So when you go over that first principle, it's like, okay, so the next question is, how can I serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through all these roles that I'm playing, right? The role of a father, husband, wife, daughter, aunt, uncle, nephew, grandchildren, community member, employee, CEO, etc., etc. And in our faith, we're taught this idea of what I call haqq balance, not work-life balance, haqq balance. What is the balance between the rights of others? So what does that mean? It means that instead of thinking about work-life balance, I mean, ask myself, am I fulfilling the haqq, the rights of all those people that I'm responsible for? Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us, says, "Kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati." All of you are shepherds, all of you are responsible, and all of you are responsible for what you've been responsible for, essentially. So when you think from the perspective of huquq and rights, it doesn't become about work and life. It becomes, let me look at my entire life, look at all the different roles I play in my life, and ask myself, am I fulfilling the haqq of this role? Am I fulfilling the haqq of being a son? Am I fulfilling the haqq of being an employee? Am I being the haqq of being an employer? Am I being the haqq of being a community member, a neighbor, etc., etc.? And from that perspective, you will then recognize a couple of things. Number one, most of us, we put a lot of energy, focus, and time in our work at the expense of other, to a point where you don't even fulfill the haqq of other roles, right? Don't fulfill the haqq of, let's say, a parent or a child or a neighbor even. And number two, recognize that we can't be 100% across all our roles. I mean, that's just, we have limited energy, focus, and time. So what we can do is saying we have to negotiate. It's just a matter of negotiate. I have to almost like, take back some energy, focus, time from one area of my life and put in other areas of my life. And it's almost like this constant negotiation. And this negotiation happens with different seasons of life, right? Sometimes if you're young, if you have a young child, or you have young children, then you need to put some more energy, focus, and time in your children compared to they're like adults and they have a life of their own. Same thing, your elderly parents, right? You have to readjust your roles so that you can serve your parents. So I feel like this idea of haqq balance, it's uncomfortable, I understand, and it does not fit sort of, again, the capitalistic productivity system that says we just want to squeeze every dime out of you to serve your work and therefore forget every other role, right? But Islam comes and says, no, there are rights, responsibilities. Now, if for some reason, let's say you cannot fulfill a certain haqq, it doesn't mean that, okay, you're immediately sinful. It means that I need to negotiate and I need to ask permission. For example, let's say you have a parent living in a different state, different country, and you have a job or working with one country. Well, you can't be there for them, perhaps because they're, with their age. So what can you do? How can you negotiate a role? How can you take care of them? Like, these are things, it's not black and white. Okay, I got to dedicate 5 hours of my time for my parents to fix that. These are things almost like you have to, almost like balance across your roles. And also not forget yourself. That's what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us. Yeah. Your body has a right upon you. Your nafs has a right upon you. Your spouse has a right upon you. Your guests have a right upon you. And it said this beautiful term, أَعْطِ كُلَّ ذِي حَقٍّ حَقَّهُ. Give each one their due right. And I think if we live by that sort of, by that sort of example, give each one their due right, it will give us a completely different understanding. And I know I'm probably opening a can of worms right now. People think, oh my God, what about this? What about that? But I think this is why I said this is something very powerful of us redefining productivity through an Islamic worldview, because it does challenge some of these common notions. Think, oh yeah, work-life balance. Okay, we just gotta put some time for like we have to also rethink everything because we have a role here on this earth. We know where we're heading, the akhirah, and meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you don't want to go through life and then meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and almost regret go how you spent your life, or because work consumed you completely, you forgot your other roles. Allah.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people, as life changes, I tell a lot of younger people, because when I was in my college years, even early, I got married pretty early. I was 23 when I got married. But, going to the masjid, going to classes, going to this, you can do a lot of that when you're single and you just got married and you don't have any kids. But the second you have kids, like I had kids, in my like early 30s, about 10 years later, and that's all I do now, right? Like one of my friends was saying, we're basically chauffeurs now for them, right? Like we drive them around from, this Quran competition, and now we're going to the basketball game, and then they got this camp and they got a class they got to go to, right? So your life is totally different. So I tell a lot of younger people, a lot of younger friends of mine, take advantage of that time that you have, right? Because you're not going to be able to do this stuff later. Or if you do, your marriage is going to be messed up, or your kids are going to be neglected, right? Those things are just realistically not going to be there. So that whole idea that you're talking about balance is like, you got to find the time for those things when it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't take away from the rights of the others that you're responsible for, right? Like your kids, definitely will take up a lot of your time. Your spouse, definitely also will, you got to devote a good amount of time to them as well. So all of that, it's kind of, I guess, it's fluid, right? The situation is always fluid. It changes. And then, sometimes at work, I think you'd agree, right? Sometimes we're very busy, sometimes not as busy. I have an accountant friend right now, extremely busy here in the US, right? It's tax season. So you don't see them for like 4 months, right? And they disappear because they got to take care of that. But I think that's a great point that you're bringing up. So one of the books that we reviewed recently on our show was the book Atomic Habits. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that book, but taking from that, how can someone develop more discipline and consistency in their daily routines, Mohammed?
Good question. So again, one of the ways that I look at this from an Islamic perspective, from a faith perspective, when we think about Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and how he taught us to build habits, right? What he would do is he would give us a classic, we call the habit formation: trigger, routine, reward, right? Example is when you leave the home, trigger, say this dua, and that's routine, and you'll get this reward, right? When you enter the house, trigger, say this thing, and then you get this reward. When you enter the bathroom, trigger, right? So very specific triggers, very specific, and that's one of the most powerful ways. That's why when it comes to building habits, one of the theories that I'm actually most inclined towards is called the tiny habits, or same as atomic habits. The idea is that find a trigger, find something that you can anchor yourself to, that will remind you to have a small behavior attached to it, something very small that will kind of start off plant the seed for the habit. Because habit it takes time, and especially for adults, it's very hard to change habits. So you want to start small, have a very clear trigger, have a clear sort of routine, and attach a reward to it. Then second, this idea of consistency. Again, I love the beautiful hadith of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says, the most beloved deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those that are, now we translate as consistent, but the Arabic says adwamuha wa inqal. Adwamuha, the word da'im doesn't necessarily mean consistent, it means lasting, right? And there's a difference between being consistent, means almost like being a machine or like a robot, every single day you do the exact same thing, versus you last means it lasts with you. So maybe a couple of days you might miss it, maybe when you're traveling you might not do it, maybe when you're sick you're not going to do it, but it's something that you'll keep coming back to it. It's just part of who you are, part of who you are when you're in your full potential. And I think that also takes a bit of pressure, because a lot of times we tend to beat ourselves up. Oh my God, I was supposed to run every day, or I'm supposed to get up for tahajjud every single day, and then if I miss it, I'm like, right. We call in psychology called the what the hell effect, right? The what the hell effect basically is like you do so well and then you mess up once, like what the hell, I forget it, right?
Give up, right?
Exactly. So I think it's very important for us to recognize the idea of lasting, and the idea of starting small. And the third point is also what I recommend is people think about what's your non-negotiable habits, what I call those keystone habits, cornerstone things that are just non-negotiable for you. For example, salah. should be like
Yeah.
non-negotiable for you, for example, right?
Yeah.
These are things that no matter what you're going to do. There are things, for example, like it says Quran, which is sometimes, unfortunately, we tend to completely forget. Well, month of Quran is coming, Ramadan is coming. That's a great time to kind of reestablish that relationship and build the habit of the Quran. The idea of, again, the things that we tend to forget, like things like exercise, things like even naps. I mean, I'm a big fan of naps. I tell people like, listen, Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who is the most busiest man, I'm going to say, on the earth, had the most important mission on earth. Don't tell me more important than him. He took time to nap, right? So naps, like this has a huge effect, not only on your day and your performance during the day, but even your ability to get up for the Tahajjud and Fajr. So I always recommend people, like, if you're struggling with Fajr prayer and Tahajjud prayer, guess what? You might need a nap. And it's like, sounds counterintuitive, but then you think about it, actually, that makes a lot of sense. So there's all of these things to consider. And final point about habits is that usually when it comes to habits, there are 3 parts of the day where you can actually have, quote unquote, consistent habits. Early mornings, afternoon, like midday afternoons, and then in the evenings. So throughout the day is very hard, right? Because you're busy, things happen, the day is fluid, as you said. But early mornings, if you can establish those morning routines and you can have some kind of a clear set of habits. Afternoon, right? The lunchtime where the nap comes in, sometimes exercise can come in, sometimes it can be, calling your parents, calling a relative, right? So that's which is a beautiful thing we need to do, can keep doing. And then evening routines. Evening routines also things that help you plan the next day. I will say something that's counterintuitive. I say that the Islamic day starts at Maghrib, right? If you think about it, for Hijri calendar, right? It starts at Maghrib. So that means that your day starts at Maghrib. Your day starts the day before, like the night before.
Right, yeah.
Powerful, which means I can actually start my day, plan my day, think about how I want to sleep tonight so I can wake up early next day. So you already have a head start. So it's a great way to think about it as well from a habit formation perspective.
Oh, that's awesome. So just going on to the next topic here, we've touched on this quite a bit already, but about spirituality so far. But what role does spirituality play in productivity, and how can faith help people stay focused and motivated?
Yeah, so I think the way that I've kind of linked this idea of productivity with spirituality is to this concept of Baraka. So if we define productivity as energy, focus, and time, right? How much energy I have, how much focus I have, how much time I have. And these are finite resources, right? I have finite energy. Some days I'm tired, some days I'm energetic. I have finite focus, right? Attention spans, and I have time as well. But Baraka is kind of I call the spiritual multiply effect. Baraka can attach itself to your energy, to your focus, or to your time. So Allah puts Baraka in your energy, so you can do so much more, even though you might be tired. For example, Ramadan is a good example, right? You might think, how, right? You're not eating as much as you used to. You're not having your coffee. You're praying at night. You're hardly sleeping. And somehow you're still productive. Somehow you're still functioning. You think, how? People think, how? Well, that's spiritual energy. That's Baraka right there. Second one is focus, right? When Allah puts Baraka in your focus, so you focus on the right things. You could waste your time, focusing on so many different things and never get anywhere. But Allah puts insights, put focus, the idea of basira. Allah gives you the insights. A believer has this idea of seeing things. Allah puts sights for him. That's Baraka. You can see the answer to the question you're looking for. You figure out that solution. You figure out how to deal with the problem, right? And it takes you like a few minutes versus taking like a whole day to figure that out. That's Baraka in your focus. And finally, of course, Baraka in your time. When you feel your time is stretched. Most of us have that feeling in the morning, as Prophet Muhammad taught us. There's Baraka in the early hours. So literally, you can look from even from a quantum physics perspective, it's like your time expands, right? You can do so much in so little time. So this idea of Baraka is one of the most powerful concepts we have in our faith. And this is what is Baraka? And I define it in my new book, The Baraka Effect. I say it's a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a divine gift. It comes from Him directly that enters into anything. Tangible, intangible, can enter your time, your wealth, your children, your home, your project, your laptop, your smartphone, your car, anything. And when it enters into this thing, into the thing that's tangible, intangible, it creates this kind of this spiritual multiply effect. There's usually growth, there's positivity, there's abundance of energy, there is peace, calmness. Even though you might think things are falling around, but you feel calm, you feel stability. So that's the emphasis there. And then, of course, with that happens, the beautiful thing about Baraka is that Baraka brings you back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It makes you even more grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it makes you even more spiritual. Because that's why sometimes I don't like to define Baraka as blessing. Because Fir'aun had blessings, right?
Right.
He used blessings against. But Baraka is that gift that makes you turn back to Him. So as a Muslim, I say Baraka is our secret sauce, really. I feel like, subhanAllah, we have a cheat sheet here. We have the same amount of energy focused time as everybody else, But Allah puts baraka in our time, baraka in baraka focus. Why? With the right, if we have the right mindsets, right? Let's say have an abundance mindset versus a
Right.
scarcity mindset. We have a God-conscious mindset. We won't steal, won't cheat. We will do things carefully, follow the halal. That's a mindset. Values. We have values to live by: honesty, integrity, ihsan. Right? These are values. Again, Allah puts barakah because of the values to live by. And find, of course, rituals, things like salah and Quran, adhkar, but also other rituals like controlling our tongue, or nowadays our fingers when typing things that are not supposed to do,
Right. Yeah.
or controlling our senses. So Allah puts barakah in your day. Giving charity is also barakah as well. So mindsets, values, and rituals attract barakah. So I feel like it's something that's very powerful. It's almost like an unexplored area. And I highly tell people, like, we need to study barakah. And the second book, Baraka Effect, was an attempt to study that, because that really is kind of like, if you want to link spirituality to productivity, it really, that's where it comes from. And just final point on this note is the hadith I mentioned early on, that the early hours are blessed for my nation. The narrator of the hadith, Sakhr al-Ghamidi, Imam Bukhari writes about him, says Sakhr al-Ghamidi was a man of trade, and he heard this hadith, so he started sending his trade early in the morning, and he became very wealthy as a result. So basically, Sakhr he's a businessman, right? So he made a spiritually intelligent decision. Hey, the Prophet Muhammad made dua for the early hours. Let me just start my day early, and he became very wealthy as a result. So I feel like sometimes we tend to disconnect our spirituality from our professional lives, from our productivity. And I feel like we're missing a lot, and I think we need to bring them together, and that's what the work we do, inshallah.
Inshallah. No, that's beautifully said. Was there any particular in your research? Were there any particulars, Imam scholars that influenced you the most in terms of the research that you did?
Now, subhanAllah, again, one of the interesting things about our tradition is that the things that we're writing about, like Baraka culture and Baraka, was common knowledge. It was almost like it was part of the culture, right?
Yeah, true.
Everyone from Ibrahim Adham to the Ghazali to Taymiyyah, all the scholars we know, they'll talk about Baraka. Like, it's common knowledge.
Right.
But it's like we've lost that language, and we've lost this culture. That's why when I was going to, one of the reasons why I wrote the Baraka Effect book was I went to one of my a friend of mine who actually runs a bookstore, and he has one of the largest bookstores in English speaking for Muslims. And I asked him, is there like a book about Baraka? And he's like, there's no one single book about Baraka. There's all this stuff here and there, but there's no one single book. And I realized the reason why, because it was just so common knowledge. It's like nowadays talking about, I don't know, because nowadays very different, but it's the fact that it's just so common knowledge. So I feel like sometimes even the scholars and people looking at it is like, how do you fit? And I think the second thing for us as well is we live in an age where, especially modernity and secularism and capitalism and all these things and consumerism have completely almost like warped how we live as human beings, right? The last 200 years, 100 years, like the way human beings live now in the past, this last 100 years, 200 years, compare that to your great-grandparents, it's completely different, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like almost like we need to almost like relearn some of this language, because it's almost like sometimes it's amazing, especially when I do my workshops, you can tell people are struggling to unlearn years of how they grew up and how they think this is normal, to realize, oh, actually you're right, this does not feel normal, and actually no, we need to go back to the fitra lifestyle. So I feel it's a struggle, but I think people are waking up to it, realizing that we can and able to redefine what it means to be productive and make meaningful contribution and be productive citizens, but at the same time not lose our soul along the way, inshallah.
Inshallah. I think this kind of cross-cultural, cross-religious, because I remember seeing a schedule of one of the founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, and he was starting his day, I think, like 4:00 in the morning, before sunrise. He would go to sleep very early, like whenever sunset was, like, or shortly after, right? So for the Muslims, like right after Isha prayer, go to bed, right? Like the sun goes down, it's kind of like, it's dark. What else am I going to do, right? There's no street lights and, restaurant to go to or whatever. So people were just naturally like that across different civilizations. So it's not the Muslims for sure. We have that in our tradition, but definitely across civilizations, even in American history, that was pretty normal to wake up very early, farmers and all that. Like it was just part of life. There's there's like a quiet time that people would have and peace to themselves. So I think that's very important for all of us to try to recapture that and kind of adjust to modernity and try to make modernity bend to our timeless traditions that are there within countless different civilizations that have come before us. So kind of going into the theme of burnout, right? Those who are stressed out, people are anxious, they feel like they're burnt out. How do you recommend handling stress and burnout, especially when people are juggling multiple responsibilities? You touched on in your early life, doing your master's, you're working 2 jobs. How do people deal with that? What is your advice to people in those type of situations?
Yeah, I think burnout is a symptom, it's a signal, right? Again, from Islamic psychology, we talk about the idea of the nafs, right? Almost like the nafs rebelling, the nafs saying, "I'm done," right? And the nafs, we call the nafs as our inner selves or ego, to put it that way, is rebelling, saying, "I'm done. I'm not gonna bend to your will anymore. Like I'm not gonna do this anymore." So there's that you get that resistance, you get that feeling of being uncomfortable, you get that feeling of just dragging your feet. Sometimes get into mild depression about it. So I feel like that's a symptom, and we need to go back to root cause, right? What's going on? And in Islamic psychology, again, one of the interesting things, there's a great paper by Dr. Bill Rothman in the APA, talks about, Western psychology versus Islamic psychology. Because Western psychology tends to stop at the cognitive level, right? We see behaviors, observable behaviors, and then we deal with them on a cognitive level, right? There's a cognitive therapy, the idea of dealing with things at a thinking level. But Islamic psychology goes deeper to the qalb, to the heart, right? And that's because Islamic psychology, the heart is the center of the human being, human consciousness.
Right.
To deal with that at the heart level. Sometimes you need to go at a heart level and saying, what's going on here? And a lot of times the heart maybe feels like I'm realizing this is not what I'm supposed to do. The way I'm living doesn't feel right. Doesn't feel aligned with what I was created for, right? Feels out of sync with the way my creator intended me to live my life. So it requires some almost like deep root surgery sometimes. It's not just a matter of, go to a mindfulness retreat and, go sing and go sit quietly in a corner, do some journaling. It needs a rethink of, again, the basic questions. Who am I? What am I? What's my purpose in life? And where am I heading, right? The 3 basic questions, which are answered in our faith. It's not something, we're not left to our devices to kind of sit down, ponder, and kind of be confused about it. We are creatures of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are His servants. We are here to worship Him, and we're heading towards either Jannah or Hellfire. I mean, that's as simple as we can put it.
Yeah.
Now, we have not aligned our lives to that. We've done everything to kind of completely ignore those 3 questions or just not do it. We fell into what I call the hustle culture. And the workism, where work has become the new religion, where we worship at work. There's a great article in The Atlantic by Derek Thompson, talks about workism, how it's making Americans miserable. And the idea of that, we've abandoned traditional religion of things like value, like you said, the values, the normal, yes, work is part of life, but it's not the life, community, right? We've kind of abandoned that, and we've made work our new religion. So, of course, we'll feel burnout. Of course, we'll feel this psychological and spiritual burnout. We feel like, what am I doing? So I feel like it's an existential question for those who are facing this situation and ask themselves, where am I going? And is this sustainable? And we need to have some hard choices and hard decisions, what it means. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, it might mean to readjust how we live our lives and what we think is, where we want to go, and deal with social pressures that come with it as well. But it's also something, important to have those conversations. That's what we try to do, talk about the idea of Baraka culture as an alternative to hustle culture. What is Baraka culture? It means it's God-centered. It's hereafter focused. Not mean neglecting this world, but means you are in this world, but also you are in this world for the sake of hereafter. You're making impact in this world for the sake of hereafter. You're impact purpose driven. You're content. You're not always busy, rushing all the time. You have this idea of tranquility, this sakina. We call this idea of sakina, tranquility. So all these are important things to hold on to, especially in a hustle culture environment. So I know it's more of a default, so not the quick hacks here, but this is, again, from the works I've done with many clients and both individuals and teams, these are sort of questions we need to ask. Otherwise, we're just kidding ourselves along the way.
I mean, this is more, from what I'm getting, this is more just like a mindset change than it is like, you could give hacks, I guess, right? But those long term are not really gonna solve a whole lot for people, I think, in these type of situations, right? Who are really stressed out and burnt out. They really need to just kind of reprogram their brain and their mindset. Is that kind of what you're in their heart? Yeah, definitely their heart. Yeah, right.
So again, it depends. There are two kinds. One is if it's a one-off thing, or you feel, we all get one at a time where we feel burned out because we work really hard, but that's usually recovered within a few days or months, and you're fine. But if it's consistent, if it's continuous, if you're not getting better, if after you take a vacation, after you take some breaks, if you still feel that burn, then there's something deeper to go down to and explore. With either a therapist or even with yourself, and sit down and think through this. But I feel like it's something given who I've spoken to in this, again, especially in the professionals world, I've seen a lot of cases of people on the top of their career who completely feel that they're losing their soul, right? They feel like they say, well, we kind of sold our souls to the devil, and feel like, who am I? I've reached the top of my career. They're executives at very large companies doing so well, but they're feeling empty. They're feeling burnt out. They're feeling spiritually empty. And this is where the conversation comes. Like, well, we need to do some deep heart surgery, literally spiritual surgery, to kind of recenter your life around what you've been created for.
So in terms of that, where have you seen, like, what have people been able to successfully do to kind of change that?
It's interesting. So there's one of my couple of my clients. One of them was somebody who we have these retreats. We do these retreats once a year, and she came to this retreat. And the first thing she said, she was like, "I don't pray." Like she's like, "I don't pray. I don't believe in prayer. I feel like Allah does not need our prayers." So I'm like, "All right, cool. You are coming to a Baraka Muslim retreat. Might as well join us for prayer since we're part of this retreat. We're here anyway." Yeah. So then she started joining us. By the last day, she started crying. She goes, "I have to pray. I need to pray." I'm like, "What happened? Did someone give you a lecture about prayer?" She's like, No. I just realized this was the anchor that was missing in my life. I was feeling like I was floating all this time, chasing what I thought success and neglecting a really important part of who I am. And I realized I need to pray. So it's something that could be as simple as talk about a hack. I mean, that's about the smallest hack you think about it, like recentering your life and redefining around Salah times, around Salah itself, which is very powerful. Another one I had was someone came, we had this table called Baraka culture, hustle culture, and you can find online. Hustle culture is like ego-centered, worldly focus, all about material results, no contentment. And she's like, "Oh my God, I'm so hustle culture." And she had almost tears in her eyes. Like she said, "I wake up 5 o'clock in the morning to attend a conference call, but I cannot wake up 5 o'clock in the morning to pray Fajr. Like I'm just completely consumed by hustle culture." She's been on a journey, and she went through, she changed her career. She went on a journey. She's actually one of our trainers now, and she's doing quite well. But it was almost like a shift. The biggest thing was a shift, like you said, a shift in our approach and our perspective on life. And being happier, right? Even though someone outside like, "Oh my God, you left a great job. What are you doing?" By the way, they're not going to just quit their jobs immediately. But it's like, in her case, that was the conclusion that she came to, and she realized, if I want to get better, I have to make a shift. And you can see she's much happier, much more centered, much more confident, and she's like, I feel alive compared just to be dead along the way. So again, it's one of the things I will always be careful about, especially with these platforms. It's not about giving quick fix solutions, right? Everyone is different. Everyone's situation is different. But the first step is to recognize something's off, right? The first step to realize, wait a second, this is not normal, right? I cannot continue my life like this. There must be a way to redefine what success means, redefine what productivity means, without this burnout and hustle culture and workism that is destroying my spirituality, my health, and my relationships with my family.
No, that's definitely deep, and I think that's going to be helpful, I think, to some of our listeners who are going through those type of scenarios. How can someone create a work environment that fosters deep focus and minimizes distractions? So getting to the Baraka and the work, what can they do to focus in on there?
Yeah, I mean, those things can be we can get down to like the hacking level now. I mean, I always talk about distractions in 3 ways. One, I talk about external distractions, right? So there's the phone, the internet, the social media, and the people around you, right? And then there's internal distractions, which is basically your thoughts, your feelings, emotions, and then life events, stuff happening in life, birth, death, marriage, moving country, moving jobs. And each of these, you can have strategies for them. Right? So again, sometimes with external distraction, we feel powerless. Oh my God, well, I'm distracted and I keep checking my phone. Well, well, you have to be proactive about, okay, how do I manage my phone? And the tools are there, the solutions are there. We all know them, right? Delete social media apps from your phone, and hide your phone. And but they're very addictive, right? These devices are very addictive. So you almost have to maybe be conscious and recognize that my ability to focus is the most important asset I have as a knowledge worker. I always tell people it doesn't matter about more than energy, more than time. Focus, out of the three pillars of productivity, energy, focus, and time, focus is perhaps the number one sort of asset, resource, jewel, because without focus, you can't do anything. And unfortunately, this is the one thing that's being attacked left, right, and center.
Yeah,
Social
sure.
media apps to people around us. So you really have to protect and guard your focus with your life. And that's why I see people like, deleting social media apps. If that's a price you have to pay, so be it. Hiding not checking your phone first thing in the morning, if that's going to be the price you pay so that you can actually have a really good focus sessions in the morning, so be it. But again, sometimes we fall for habits and we feel uncomfortable because yes, we crave the distraction. We want to be distracted. It makes us feel good. But again, it's like, what's the opportunity cost, right? What's the opportunity cost? And also people are like, yes, you might be checking your phone every time 5 to minutes. I think it's harmless, but what's the opportunity cost to your prayers? Our prayers are distracted. What's your opportunity cost to read the Quran? We don't have time for Quran. What's the opportunity cost to spending quality time with a parent who's perhaps dying, or a young child who wants to hear from you? What's the opportunity cost to your work and the quality of your work, right? So I feel like it's a huge opportunity cost. And once you realize the cost, you're like, you know what? Nah, I'm not taking it. So that's with the phone. And then with people, again, sometimes we get communication, finding the right zones, and of course, good old headphones. The hardest ones are sometimes, your phone is off and people are not around you, but you have internal distractions, right? It's like the emotions, the movies that keep playing in your head, the thoughts, the feelings. Someone shoots you an email, a text message that kind of throws you off. You check stuff on Twitter or Instagram, and you see those images, especially from Gaza or others, that really disturb you. So how do you deal with that? I think that is the harder, because you might be no external distraction, but internally distracted. So again, how do you compartmentalize? How do you writing things down, making dua, talking to having coaches and therapists talk to? These are really powerful things. And last but not least, the life events, right? Sometimes life events like COVID, right? or something.
That's a big one.
Yeah, that completely throws off your focus, right? Or again, a young birth of a child, death, divorce, all that stuff. And these things could be temporary, which means you have to go through the kind of process, the grieving process, or the whole process of just dealing with them. And something can be long-term. Let's say dealing with a terminally ill child or terminally ill parent, which takes years. How do you still focus while you have that sort of quote-unquote issue at home to deal with? I think that requires compartmentalization, requires being able to know when to deal with that and when you cannot deal with it, kind of focus, asking for help from others. These are all related to focus. So I also think focus is not just simply about turning off your phone. It's a lot more deeper, but I'll repeat it. It is the most important resource we have. So protect God with your life and do everything you can to make sure you don't lose your focus.
Okay. No, that's excellent advice. So speaking of advice, so if you could just give one piece of advice to someone who feels overwhelmed and unproductive, what would it be?
I guess the first step is this too. I guess when I give one of more like a high advice, one of the practical advice, the more like sort of general advice is recognize who you are, right? You are a abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are, I use the word slave of God, and I know the word slave has very negative connotations. People like the word servant, but I feel like something very powerful of accepting and recognizing that you are a slave of God, because then you belong to Him. And we say inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un, you belong to Him.
Yeah.
And by that notion, they say it's like the highest honor that you belong to that, right? Versus, of course, with the human beings, of course, it's like the lowest thing. So accepting that you are abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are a slave of God. So act like a slave of God, meaning that one, of course, obey Him, but also be grateful to Him, talk to Him, reach out to Him, right? Like ask Him, like don't make it the last thing in your mind or the thing you'll do when you're free. Like act like he owes you and you need Him, like you desperately need Him. That's the first kind of like mindset shift we're talking about, perspective. And the more practical thing is, if you just get started, is again the early hours, like really the early hours. If you can get that fajr down, that first hour. Like, get up, don't check your phone, don't check Facebook, don't check WhatsApp, don't check Twitter. Get up, do your adhkar of morning from waking up, make wudu, pray fajr, do your morning adhkar, read some Quran, have that morning coffee if you need to, and
Right.
just that's that first, even put it to the circle to say protect your first hour. Don't let your brain get hijacked by the external world. Protect
Yeah.
your first hour. Even if you do just that, that will set you off on a great trajectory, inshallah.
Inshallah. No, that's excellent. So as a parent who's trying to raise, hopefully productive children, inshallah, what advice do you have for parents who are trying to do that, trying to raise productive kids and the next generation? What advice would you have for them?
Great advice. I think with kids, I guess they emulate, right? They follow your example. If they see you staying out late at night watching Netflix, right, they'll follow example. Even though go to bedtime and don't check a screen, and if they see you addict to your phone all the time, not able to take your hands off your phone, they'll follow suit. So the best advice I give to parents, and I'm sure including myself, is really be the best role model you can be. Right? If they see you show up to prayers and honor prayers and honor Quran and honor your parents and listening to them. I was doing a workshop for kids here in South Africa, and then one day was for kids, one day I was doing for their parents. And so I asked the kids, hey guys, kids, what do you want me to tell your parents tomorrow? Without missing a beat, they all said, get off your phones. Like literally without all of them, they didn't sit and discuss it. Like without me, they just all said, get off your phones. I was like, wow. Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, that was their call. And it's a heartwarming call that we need to listen to as parents. So I feel like us being the best role model and even seeing kids of parents who are quote unquote productive. Like subhanAllah, there's one of, again, a good friend of mine, he passed away, and look at his children. And subhanAllah, see his children extremely productive. And I'm like, subhanAllah. But I realized it's not like the parents sat down and gave them lectures or workshops or took them to 10 activities. It's that they role modeled it, right? They showed them how they were living their lives. They showed that they were not addicted to TV shows, emails, or they was not wasting time. They were actually they were either reading, they were writing, they were going to, they were not wasting time. So that would be the advice that I give myself first, and of course, all of us, inshallah, as parents.
I appreciate that, Mohammed. So as we wrap up, you mentioned a couple of your books, the Baraka Effect being one of them. But are there any other books that you would recommend in terms of productivity that could help our listeners?
I mean, again, I'll say the best advice for books that I was given was scratch your own itch, right? So figure out what are you struggling with right now, and someone wrote a book about it, right? So if you're struggling waking up early, someone wrote a book. If you're struggling with sleep, if you're struggling with focus, there's many books about focus. So scratch your own itch. So what is it that you're struggling with right now in terms of productivity or burnout again? And then figure out sort of how to there's someone who wrote a book about it. And secondly, I'd say that the one advice I always give to Muslims specifically is that they need, as much as I respect self-help genre, and of course I'm part of that genre, is to always to filter things from a faith perspective. Every author, they write the book from their own worldview, right? So a lot of the self-help genres, it tends to be very ego-centered, very worldly focused. No akhirah, no prophetic sort of akhlaq. So I highly recommend that. Yes, of course, the wisdom is Allah's property believer. You can learn from anybody, but make sure you always have your spiritual lens on, and you kind of redefine things, because some things some advice you read actually might harm you spiritually. And I've seen, again, a few people that I know personally who went on with some of these very important self-help gurus and end up getting to depression and realizing when totally against the fitrah. So I feel like these are things that we need to be careful of, and when we read and explore, and I actually recommend that we need more Muslims in the self-help genre. We need Muslim authors who contribute the Islamic worldview, because we have something to offer. We have the last divine message to mankind. I mean, come on, we have a lot to offer. So it can't just be one or two books from Islam, but it should be like hundreds of books from our faith. Right. So this is a call to your audience, inshallah, for any authors in the house to write and share the gift we have, inshallah.
Definitely. Hopefully that will inspire, a multitude of Muslim Americans and others to follow in your footsteps. Mohammed, before we wrap up, where can our listeners find you, find more information about what you're working on? Please share that with us.
Absolutely. So inshallah, you can find us on productivemuslim.com, and you can subscribe to a newsletter. So you go to productivemuslim.com/newsletter. That's where you can, I usually send 1 or 2 emails a week. And you can find more details about kind of all the events we do, workshops, webinars, and courses, inshallah.
Inshallah. We appreciate it. Mohammed, thanks so much for coming on. I think this, I honestly probably could have gone on for like 2-3 hours, I think, asking you questions. I had a few, maybe a couple that, they could have gone on even more. I could have just kept pushing, but unfortunately we're pressed for time, but we really do appreciate you coming on and joining us as a guest. That's Mohammed Faris, everyone. TheProductiveMuslim.com is the website. I follow Mohammed, pretty frequently on LinkedIn as well. A lot of great content there as well. Great testimonials. I was reading some of the stories from some of the people who've attended your workshops and just seeing the effects that your work has had on them is awesome. So again, thank you so much, Mohammed, for being a guest on the UIF Community Podcast. We really appreciate it. And for UIF, we're the leader in Islamic home financing in the US. Go to our website, myuif.com. We're offering Islamic home, commercial, auto, and Islamic savings accounts now as well across the US. So reach out to us there. We'll be happy to help you, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. As-Salaam Alaikum.